Hello, my name is Shrees Goodgod and I will be doing my video presentation. For my video presentation, I will be tackling a Greek myth that is quite well known, but not exactly in the way I interpret it. For today, I will be talking about Hades, Persephone, and the changing of the seasons. Before we tackle this myth head-on, I would first like to talk about Persephone's backstory. Okay, Persephone, the goddess of spring, is the daughter of Zeus and Demeter. Demeter is an overbearing mother who is very protective of Persephone and is very adamant onto keeping her as a virgin, hence her other name Kore, which means maiden in Greek. This leads to Persephone craving some freedom of her own. On the flip side, Hades gets lonely in the underworld because no one visits him out of fright, because they think it's the underworld, it's scary, there's ghosts. So, because of this, he asks Zeus to help him with obtaining a wife. Glad that his brother is finally searching for love, Zeus offers his daughter Persephone, not regarding the fact that the action of giving Persephone to Hades would lead to consequences because he never consulted Demeter on what he was doing to their daughter. At this point, Hades has Zeus's consent, but he knows Demeter won't give him Persephone's hand in marriage. So, he devises a plan to snatch Persephone up by setting up a narcissus flower to enchant her so he can steal her away into the underworld. At first, Persephone is scared and nervous because she just got kidnapped by the scary king of the underworld, whom she's grown up hearing terrible stories about. However, she soon finds out that Hades isn't really a bad guy. For one thing, Hades showers Persephone with lavish gifts and treats her kindly. Hades also offers her a spot as equal and queen in the underworld. Also, at one point, Persephone requests a place to be created for the best mortals to go after they die, so Hades makes Elysium. Because of the way Hades is treating her kindly and as an equal, Persephone is starting to think, hey, maybe this whole underworld gig isn't actually that bad? Question mark? However, up on Earth, Demeter realizes that Persephone is lost and out of grief starts neglecting the Earth. Because of this, humans are slowly dying. Yikes. Demeter soon realizes that it's all Zeus's fault because he gave away their daughter without her permission. Because of this, she storms over to Mount Olympus and the two gods begin to argue. Down in the underworld, there is a rule. If you eat food in the underworld, you have to stay in the underworld. Persephone hasn't been eating anything because of this rule, but she gives in and eats 6 pomegranate seeds out of hunger. Because of the trouble that Demeter is causing on Earth, Hermes goes down to the underworld and approaches Persephone to tell her that her mother is slowly killing humankind. Because of this, Persephone follows Hermes because she's concerned of what her mother is doing. Once Hermes and Persephone get to Mount Olympus, Demeter pleads to Persephone to come home or she'll kill everything on Earth. However, Persephone tries to assure her that Hades is actually very nice and treats her gracefully and as an equal. While mother and daughter argue, Hades comes to Mount Olympus as well and shows everyone the eaten fruit. At this point, Demeter kind of loses it. Okay, at this point, Zeus is sick of all the fighting, so he takes matters into his own hands. He then asked Persephone how many seeds she ate, and she said 6, so Zeus decided to create a compromise that would suit both Hades and Demeter. Because of this, he creates a plan to make Persephone stay for 6 out of 12 months in the underworld with Hades. To break it down for you, in the fall and the winter, Persephone goes down into the underworld to rule with Hades. Demeter is so sad during this time because she doesn't have her daughter by her side that she just destroys all the crops and harvest and nothing grows and everything is cold. However, in the spring and summer, Persephone leaves the underworld to be with the living world and her mother Demeter so they can come back and enrich the earth once more. And that is how the Greeks interpreted the changing of the seasons. What I find interesting about this myth is how people perceive Hades. Just because he rules the underworld, people think of him as mean, terrifying, evil, all those bad connotations when he didn't necessarily do anything to deserve them. Surely Disney's version of Hercules did not help him at all because they put Hades as the main villain in it, but in the actual story of Hercules, Hades didn't even play that big of a role. In the actual story itself, one of Hercules' tasks is to grab Cerberus. Once down at the underworld, Hades is actually pretty nice and chill about it. All he told Hercules was, "Sure, you can borrow my dog, but just don't use any weapons on him." And in some versions of that myth, Hercules actually shoots Hades, which I don't understand why for some reason, but in short, Hades' depiction in the Disney movie of Hercules is probably why modern times doesn't like him as much, but in ancient Greece, there's a different story, but still just as confusing. As I've mentioned before, Hades' title as the god of the underworld has given him a bad rep over the past few years, and in ancient Greece it was no different. But the thing is, they just drew lots. They literally just drew lots. Like, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades drew lots to see who would get which, and Hades got the underworld. He didn't choose it, he just got it. Ancient Greece's idea of Hades is not the best. You could definitely say that. Everyone thought of him as scary, rude, mean, or just downright evil, probably because of his title as the god of underworld. Hades wasn't a god everyone wanted to worship or be around, and I think it's because humans in general don't like the idea of death. You want to give us someone who's supposed to be in charge of us after we die? No way, Jose, get him out now! But the thing is, Hades doesn't do much besides keep the peace downstairs. He governs the place after humans die and rules fairly and justly to properly sort the human souls out. We've been giving this guy such a bad name, but he's only doing his job. To further connect my analysis of Hades into my retelling, he gets a bad rep even further because of this very myth. If some, if not most sources, people list this off as the rape of Persephone. Now, I'm not saying Hades is off the hook for that, but in comparison to the rest of the Olympians, they have done much worse deeds than him, and repetitively, in some gods' cases, Zeus, I'm looking at you, but he is the one that gets such a bad rep. I just don't get it. What I also analyze differently in this myth is how Persephone reacts to the whole thing. Sure, she's scared at first. She got kidnapped. I mean, yeah, everyone would. However, I would think she falls in love with Hades as much as he had for her because of how kindly and gracefully he would have treated her. Considering the notion that the mater would have restricted many of Persephone's freedoms, I would think Persephone would jump at the chance to having a bigger role and being the one to govern instead of being the one governed. It has to be mentioned that in older retellings of this myth that Persephone goes down into the underworld herself because she feels bad for the souls down there and becomes the queen of the underworld all on her own accord. That's kind of really badass, actually. And there you have it, the analysis of the misunderstood king and his loving and strong wife. I very much prefer this version of the myth because I do like the idea of a mostly happy ending for most of them. And I say mostly because of other myths that include Nymph, Adonis, and a few more others. But the Greeks, it's okay. The Greek gods and goddesses, they're just all over the place. This has been the myth of Hades and Persephone, and this is my video presentation.